Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
If you take sheep and add water, it equals life to humankind. Truly, there's a protein for sustenance. There's the protein fiber that clothes and shelter us, and the skin of the harvested animal that gives us the meat became man's early shelters. So they have it all.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Mary and Emma Kingsley, the mother and daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now. The farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in. Welcome to the Good Dirt Podcast. Welcome new listeners, welcome returning listeners. We appreciate you all so much, all of your support and notes and DMs and emails and calls and questions. Keep them coming. We also are so excited to share them with you. So if we get messages or questions that we think would resonate with others, we're going to share them here. New listeners, I especially love when I get DMs from people who say, I just found you. That's so fun. So if you just found us, shoot me a DM. We are Lady Farmer on Instagram. So this email comes to us from Abby G. Mom, would you like to read it?
Yes. So Abby says, hello. I've been an enthusiastic follower of your podcast since I received your book as a gift on Christmas. I've learned a great deal through the podcast and am abundantly grateful for your work and vision. Well, thank you, Abby. And she goes on to say, since the episode on school supplies aired, I've been challenged to re-examine many aspects of sustainability as it pertains to, specifically, family life. I have 3 kids, ages 3, 9, and 11, and between the busyness of sports, school, tutoring, etc., there's often not much time or money left to splurge on some of the more radical zero-waste sustainable options out there. Hence, I'm wondering if you could possibly provide advice or additional suggestions and resources that you would recommend regarding how to integrate the values of slow living and sustainability within the limitations of modern family life. Thank you in advance for your time and consideration. Thank you, Abby. And first thing I want to say is that I can relate. I raised 3 kids in the middle of all that, and I understand the challenges of balancing time and money and mental space to try to create a new lifestyle. We really get that. And that's why we're here, to help everybody. So,
yeah. And another thing that I want to say is we have a ton of great, amazing, creative business owners and creators and innovators, people that come on the show with wonderful products that they offer the world. And it is not our intention to say you must buy this to be sustainable. We are simply highlighting cool people that have done some cool problem solving alternatives. And the unfortunate reality with the way the system works right now is in order to do things without causing a ton of harm, you have to use more resources and pay people well. So that ends up making products very expensive. So we understand. And it always is, number one, the most sustainable thing is to not buy new things or even create new things. It is to use what you currently have and what currently exists. So my very first thought, and specifically with this question pertaining to school supplies, would be to just try to see how far you can get with the rule of no new school supplies. Maybe make it a game, or I know my mom has some good ideas around this, but make it fun to dig out all of the markers and colored pencils and things in the house that might already exist, including notebooks that might only have a few pages written on them in the front. And all those things that we're told we need to buy every year, I bet you have a lot more than you think you do. And instead of taking the mental energy to go to the store and buy new stuff, maybe if you take that time and say, we're going to go shopping in our house. That would be where I would start.
Yes, and in this episode that you're referring to with Wisdom Supply, and also in the bonus episode that we did on school supplies back in the fall, which you can listen to, the advice is the same. As Emma said, go through your drawers, take stock of what you have, just shift your mentality from thinking everybody needs a nice new package of brand new markers and say, yeah, the ones that are still in the drawers and that we're digging out from everywhere in the house are just as good. And those crayons that might be halfway down, they still have halfway to go. We don't need a new box of crayons yet. So there are lots of ways to approach this in terms of school supplies, but really it applies to everything. We're not going to be able to buy sustainability. We're not going to be able to buy these magic products that will shift our lifestyle. How we are going to shift our lifestyle is to shift our mindset and to shift our way of looking at things, our time, our resources, our relationship to the land, and begin to make decisions based upon our values on that score.
On that note, that's also not to create a shame or guilt around buying things, which has to happen sometimes, but it's more to wedge space in between the problem and then what we purchase in order to solve that problem, to wedge space in there to say, what can we do before we buy something? Whether it's find something you already have, maybe put out a call out on your neighborhood listserv. If that's a thing. If you really don't have stuff in your house, maybe your neighbor does and they're trying to get rid of it. Maybe your teacher might be into this idea of a school supply pool where, everybody pools their school supplies and borrows them because it's more than likely that not every single student is using the exact same thing at the exact same time. I know that happens sometimes, but kind of the idea of a neighborhood tool lending library or something. I don't know. I just thought of 2 or 3 things off the top of my head that I just so random and it's not even a specific problem. But if you just kind of tell yourself at first, your first option is not to buy anything new, what can happen there in that space? So that's where we go. And then of course, if it is unsolvable without buying something new, that happens too. But it's not anything to feel guilty or bad about. It's just to give yourself the opportunity to be creative first. What's so fun about sustainability is it's very creative and you get to be resourceful and creative and kind of kooky sometimes.
Yes, and try to let go of the feeling that it's all or nothing. You're either all in or all out. It's not that way at all. Sometimes if you have 5 decisions to make and one of those decisions becomes to do something rather than buying something new, then you've made progress. So just give yourself a lot of elbow room. Open yourself up to creative and new ways of thinking about things. And just try to be aware of the impulse that whatever problem comes along, school supplies, clothing, so many things, the things we use every day around the house. Just try to get away from the thinking that it's necessary to go out and buy this thing or buy this thing new. And you'll be surprised at the solutions that come up with just thinking about it a different way. So yes.
Totally. Thank you so much, Abby G. This was such a great question. And we really appreciate everyone. Keep the messages coming. Also, if you have a sweet, sweet note like Abby did, something to say, it's also great to write that in the review section of Apple Podcasts. Reviews really help other people find the show. So if you have a chance to review and share this episode, that would be so lovely. We'd really appreciate that so much. So now we're so excited to get into today's episode with Jeanne Carver.
Yes, and speaking of creative and genius people that are doing things out in the world to help shift the paradigm, today we have Jeanne Carver, who launched Shaniko Wool Company in 2018 to scale the supply of responsible wool produced in the U.S. This effort continues the work she began in 1999 when a collapsing wool market and diminished U.S. textile infrastructure led Jeanne from commodity wool sales from their historical Oregon ranch, Imperial Stock Ranch, which was established in 1871, in a new direction. Similar to the farm-to-fork slow food movement that reconnects us to our food, Jeanne developed a fiber supply chain as close to home as possible, ensuring the welfare of the sheep, the land they graze on, and the workers who tend both.
In 2014, Jeanne partnered with Ralph Lauren for their Made in America Olympic uniform program, the first one. She was the voice again for American Wool for the 2018 and 2022 Winter Olympics Team USA uniforms. And then in 2020, Jeanne and Shaniko Wool Company launched their Carbon Initiative, a research program that documents positive ecosystem and climate impacts of the management and ranching practices implemented by their ranches. In the meantime, she has received a number of awards, including the Industry Innovation Award by the American Sheep Industry, as well as being chosen by the Textile Exchange to be the voice of responsible animal fibers globally in the film that they recently released. She also co-authored Stories of Fashion, Textiles, and Place, Evolving Sustainable Supply Chains with Dr. Leslie Davis Burns that was released in November of 2021.
In this episode, we'll hear how Jeanne created a fully traceable wool supply chain. Relying on common sense, hard work, and perseverance, she instinctively tied her products to place, telling their origin story of heritage and land stewardship. So here's Jeanne Carver of Shaniko Wool Company.
Jeanne Carver, and I'm at the Imperial Stock Ranch in Oregon. And also this is the headquarters not only of the ranch, our family ranch, but of Shaniko Wool Company, which is my newer effort. And it builds on the work that I began with just our family ranch. It's also the headquarters of Shaniko Wool Company, which is a continuation of my work in taking fiber to market. That specific journey began in 1999 for me to take it direct. And Shaniko Wool Company is a continuation of what we've done first from our own family ranch. And so to really help you understand how I got to what I'm doing today, which is the greatest work I've ever been involved with, is what's happening with Shaniko Wool Company right now. But people go, how did you get here? Well, really it begins in the late 1980s. And my husband wanted a plan to manage the whole of our natural resources and landscape. And so he worked with our agency partners, our Soil and Water Conservation District, Natural Resource Conservation Service, and others to really look at this land. My husband always wanted to see the earth win. From the day I met him, I think that phrase was in his conversation, because when we look around, we see the earth losing. And he loves wilderness. He loves the land. We were both raised in rural Oregon in remote locations. He always wanted to preserve that. He got together with these natural agency partners, and they began evaluating this landscape. We managed 50 square miles in one contiguous piece. And so they spent a year evaluating, monitoring, and looking at the operation. We've also raised sheep and cattle and had cropping and hay production continuously. And so by 1989, they had built what we call a conservation management plan, and we began executing that. And you could see changes in year one. One of the things we always work collaboratively with our agencies is our Fish and Wildlife Department has been monitoring spawning salmons and doing salmon counts for many, many, many decades. And in 1990, only 2 salmon returned to spawn in Buck Hollow Creek, of which we're the birthplace of that creek. The first 15 miles of that creek is on our ranch. And it was a huge wake-up call. And my husband became a leading rancher voice to help bring all the landowners in the Buck Hollow Basin together, along with all of our agency partners and other stakeholders, to address this issue of loss of species, in particular salmon. You know, in the Northwest, this began with the native peoples. Salmon was life to people. It was the primary food source. And so we're considered to be salmon nation. And when you see a species like that dwindle to the point of nearing extinction, you start to look at what part did we have in this and what do we do now? It's a sobering responsibility. And so this Buck Hollow Watershed Project, what we saw in less than we hoped, we would see a change in that spawning population in our lifetime. What we didn't expect was what happened with that concerted collaborative effort. We saw 1,000 salmon return to our creeks in well under 20 years' time. Wow. With these mindset changes and management, the return of salmon and the grazing animals that play a role in that is the greatest conservation story we've ever been part of. That Buck Hollow Watershed Project became the foundation for the entire state of Oregon to blanket the state watersheds with stakeholder groups that would work collaboratively to steward our land and water resources. That's a far cry from selling wool and making textiles, but it's not really, because also in the early 90s, because we live every day I open my eyes, I'm looking at this landscape, you put your boots on and you're out the door. You cannot work this land without being reminded of all those before you. And so we live at a headquarters, which is 22 acres of grounds and buildings, where every significant building was built before industrialization. It was all built during horsepower. And we still use all of those facilities, and we maintain them and we preserve them. It's a beautiful walking tour, and I've toured thousands of people through here over the years by appointment. And so I felt a calling to do the research and write the history and put this ranch headquarters on the National Register of Historic Places. So all through the 90s, I was doing the historic preservation research and writing. My husband was being a creative manager of natural resources. You know what? These two go hand in hand. You're telling everyone's stories, and we're writing today's story and setting the stage for the future. And then 1999 happened. This ranch's largest production area through the 1800s and past the first half of the 1900s into the 1960s, post-World War II, the largest production area for this ranch was sheep. And it was the wool, because wool was the core of humankind's textiles. It still is. And this was a very large sheep operation. And we had been selling our wool harvest to the same company for 100 years. We were the biggest provider of wool to that company as it began and built their future. In 1999, we called up that company and said, "Hi, Dave, how's it going? What's the price this year? What will you give us for this harvest?" Because in agriculture, typically we're a price taker, not a price maker. And this man whom we knew well said to us, "Folks, I'm really sorry, but we're closing our processing here. We're going offshore like everybody else." They had to find a way forward in a changing marketplace, in a changing policy. All of us have to adapt to change. And it comes to us from every direction: markets, policy, legislation, climate, whatever it is. We have to adapt and find our way forward in order to survive. So my husband looked at me and said, either we find our own markets for what the sheep provide us and have provided us, or they'll be gone off this ranch. Mm-hmm. So you see, between 96 and 2000, in just that 4-year period, 26,000 sheep producers in the United States went out of the sheep business. Because of these factors, we were losing our textile infrastructure, an industry, by the way, that it helped build this country and make it the country. To see that be decimated is heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. That was jobs, that was families, that was communities. You can walk through the southeast and the northeast today of our country and still see the shuttered facilities. So we had other factors too. I mean, we had consolidation in our food sector, which we're all aware of. And in all of Western America, by 1999, we primarily had one buyer of lamb commercially in all of Western America. And they were importing shiploads of frozen carcasses to put into our retail grocery cases and our restaurants, because we're blessed with this free enterprise democracy and, gives us many blessings. But it also means that Sometimes our companies will go where they can get cheaper product to increase their profit margin. And that then creates this ripple effect that affects so many people in so many ways. So we had numerous challenges, and my husband said, find our own way or they will be gone. And I began what I called my Keep Peep program. We're going to keep Peep the sheep on the ranch, right? Because these animals are amazing. I absolutely love sheep. The Creator gave us many gifts, but sheep provide food, clothing, and shelter in one animal for the survival of the human species. And they ask nothing from us. If you take sheep and add water, it equals life to humankind. Truly, there's a protein for sustenance. There's the protein fiber that clothes and shelter us, and the skin of the harvested animal that gives us the meat became man's early shelters. So they have it all. And at the same time, they have a purpose. All grazing animals have a purpose. Their purpose in life is to bite grasses. Their purpose is just to bite plants. And they move across the landscape and they bite those plants and stimulate that growth above ground, below ground, seed head production. They revitalize plants and they take that protein, that sunlight energy that began in the soil as a seed with water and sunlight. And that became all this rich nutrient vegetable protein that a grazing animal bites and converts to another form of proteins, multiple forms of protein. Their role on grasslands is critical. And the more we remove them, the worse off our climate situation becomes. So he gave me the challenge. I began the work. I began working on the wool, and we moved forward. And a year later, I put my first product in the market. For 13 years, I worked my heart out. I didn't know if anyone would care. I didn't know if anyone would buy what we had. I did something instinctively because I didn't know anything. I attached our story of stewardship and our story of heritage to the product. I connected it to place. Turns out place is really important. And a year later, I went into the market with my first yarns and my first product. I also, at my husband's encouragement, reached out to chefs in our region for our beautiful mature lamb product. And they were the first ones to really ground me to this. As I brought that fresh lamb to the back door of the kitchen, one of the chefs said, "Jeanne, you are the perfect slow food." This is June of 2000. 23 years ago. I said, "What's that?" I didn't know about the slow.
You're like, it's just food. Yeah.
All about connecting. You know, I was a ranch wife. I was out on the ground doing all this stuff, but I was not a fashion designer. I was not in textiles. I was not in the food industry. I was finding my way to survive, to preserve the role we have as ranchers in bringing food, clothing, and shelter to humankind, and at the same time, protecting the natural resource itself. Being a steward. This is our garden, and we are called to tend that garden. And that's what we do.
That was kind of before slow fashion and all of that evolved, or the concept of it anyway. You're the OG slow fashion.
Doing what you need to do to move things forward, to preserve the role of these animals, to steward their life, the life of the land, and the harvest all the way to a beautiful product, and then tell its story in the market. That's just common sense, folks, right? That's how it used to be. We can't help it that, and evolving, if we truly did evolve, in some ways we have, in others we've gone backwards, but we disconnected all of that into these massive global supply chains that, guess what, has harmed our personal health, our communities, our countries, and our planet. Now I'm pounding along, trying to figure this out, trying to scale my mountain to sell our harvest. I've been working hard, hoping somebody would drive down this road to see who we are and what we do, and that it would matter to someone, that somebody would care, because this was really hard work. I was like the salmon swimming upstream against all the obstacles. And so the phone rang. It was August. The London Olympics were going on. And there was this uproar over the Chinese-made Olympic uniforms. And
I remember that.
bless them, are the vendor, have the license for the Team USA uniforms. Then they provide those year after year, and they do a beautiful job. And they put people on the ground immediately in response, looking to find a way to make those uniforms in the United States. And I got a phone call by a product development researcher. And he said, I'm with product development for Polo Ralph Lauren in New York. I said, you're kidding me. Are you serious? He says, yes, I'm looking for an American yarn for a special project. In my research, I keep finding you. And I said, well, that's amazing. I said, I'm in the Oregon desert. In fact, I'm outside right now. Can you hear the sheep? And I held up the phone, and we had sheep in this ridge pasture behind the headquarters. They had come in to shade up in the mid part of the day. They were drinking from the spring, and you could hear the bells jingling, and the mamas talking to the babies, and the babies talking to the mamas. Ma, ma, you could hear the jingling, ling. I left the phone out for about 45 seconds. I came back on and said, did you hear them? Because he's in his cubicle in a high-rise in Manhattan. He said, that was amazing. I transported him. I transported him for a moment into our world, the world of sheep, the world of the land, the world of nature, and of the beautiful wool harvest. And I said, no, it's amazing you're calling me. And that began a journey, a new journey. And what that did was I not only got an order, the biggest yarn order of my life up till then, it became the yarns for the opening ceremony uniforms for Team USA at the first Made in America Olympic uniform program that Ralph Lauren did.
I remember that. That's amazing, Jeannie. I remember seeing those.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. That is such an amazing story.
And then they did something even better.
Yeah.
They worked with 41 companies to make those uniforms, and they chose to tell our story. They made a film about us, and they told the world. Now, that was the somebody that for years I had said to my husband, if only somebody would come down this dirt road. And truly they came. They sent their design team, later their film team, to capture our life and our story and our part in the value story of a wool garment begins in the soil and on those grazing lands and with those animals who bite those plants and convert that sunlight energy in plants into the fiber, and in that process stimulate, which, by the way, those plants grow, pull down CO2, put it into the ground. And that's part of that natural interconnected relationships and synergy designed by someone greater than any one of us, that creator. They told our story, and that drove others to our door, many, many others. One of those was Patagonia a year later. And when Patagonia called in the summer of 15, they wanted us to be third-party audited for our land stewardship and our animal husbandry practices. They were working with a whole collective of people in textiles around the world, brands, supply chain partners, nonprofits that advocate land stewardship like the Nature Conservancy, animal rights advocates like Four Paws, Textile Exchange, who was leading this effort to bring benchmarks for preferred wool, meaning that when that wool was harvested, that the land and the animals where it came from were cared for and met these benchmarks. Third party certified to help decrease the risk of brands and improve confidence for those brands and for the people that are listening, for those who purchase those products, to feel more confident about how the land is being cared for, the soil, the water, the biodiversity issues, and the animals' well-being, and even the workers. We asked Patagonia for the draft of the standard that was being developed because we didn't know anything about it. And when we read through it, and it's very comprehensive and quite lengthy, my husband and I looked at that and I said, should we do this? He said, well, we already do everything in this document. I said, I know, but do we go down this road? He said, we have no reason not to. And I said, okay. So we said yes. And at Patagonia's suggestion, we became a pilot audit site as the responsible wool standard was in its final stages of development. It launched in 2016, and our ranch became the first ranch certified in the world.
Wow.
I've been a poster child for this effort ever since.
You are the standard.
We always keep working toward being better, but
Right.
that's part of what's built into the standard.
Yeah.
Right.
So did Patagonia, did they invent that responsible wool standard with you guys? Or is this something they'd been cooking up with other people as well? Explain to us the responsible wool standard, the RWS, and how that came about.
It came about, it follows the work of Textile Exchange. Textile Exchange is a global nonprofit headquartered here in the United States in Texas. They're a wonderful organization because they work across fibers. They work across supply chains. It first began in cotton, working to bring organic cotton to market because cotton is a fiber that we use in a massive way. And it historically has had issues around pesticide use and water and soil health. A lot of concern over cotton production on those issues. So Textile Exchange wanted to help drive change forward in more sustainably produced cotton. It became evident that the down in our coats and sleeping bags was plucked from live geese. So now they turned their attention and built the responsible down standard.
I see.
The next place they went was wool, because wool is a miracle fiber. It's an amazing fiber. It's a renewable harvest. And so they were the ones leading the development, and Patagonia was one of the many brands involved. Those brands who are leading thinkers, who want to help effect change and make things better. It was a whole group of brands that helped build the responsible wool standard, their input. So the responsible wool standard was built by this whole collaborative effort of stakeholders, like I already think I mentioned, the land conservationists, animal husbandry and animal rights people, the brands. 60% plus or more of the people involved with Textile Exchange are brands like Patagonia, North Face, many, many brands. They spent about 3 years researching and writing. They involved wool producing groups, sheep producing groups from all around the world, Australia, New Zealand, South America, South Africa. And I was involved from the United States because I was brought in by Patagonia. That's how I got involved. And then I became a pilot audit site. And then when they launched their standard, after all this work over a 3 to 4 year period, they had the pilots, they had multiple public reviews of the standard before it actually launched. And then it launched in 2016. And then our ranch, I filed our application with a certification body to be audited. They came and did their extensive audit. We received our scope certificate. We were the first ones to hold one in the world. So Shaniko Wool Company today is growing on that effort. The brands continued to knock on our door. The brands wanted traceability. They wanted sustainably produced. And so I decided to scale the supply of responsible wool produced in the United States if I could find other ranchers to join me. So I launched Shaniko Wool Company in 2018 to do exactly that. I saw it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to showcase good management practices in farming and ranching in this country, and specifically with sheep raising and wool harvesting. It was an opportunity to showcase great work, and it was an opportunity to bring a better value to the farmer and the rancher to pay a premium for that wool because it met these benchmarks. And my only challenge now was, could I sell it? So I established Shaniko Wool Company to scale the wool. We're not a co-op. It's a private company. I'm the owner and the founder.
Talk about some of the obstacles in your journey to this, accomplishing this responsible wool standard.
Initially, I will say one was that our American national industry was not necessarily jumping on board with this standard. And so I was sort of going it alone. So I didn't necessarily have the support of a greater industry. yet. It was, I'm an early adopter. It takes a while. That has changed since, but at the time that was a challenge. And because of that, I was worried that any ranchers would want to join me, or if they would see it as some outside entity trying to tell us how to do business in our own industry. That can be a concern for farmers and ranchers. But the other two things that were really the challenges was the paperwork. Because we did not have a formally written management plan of how we care for the soil, steward our grasslands, what our farming practices were, what our animal husbandry practices are, our health programs, our genetic and breeding program. We didn't have that written up. Who would have asked to see it? Nobody. Nobody had ever asked to see it. Now, we did have our conservation management plan, and that really lifted me up. But the obstacles I knew would be two. The paperwork required to have available for an auditor to review when they come and audit you, besides the tour on the land and with the animals and with your facilities. They would want to see all the documentation that supports the fact that we say we operate like this. So you're going to give them a tour so they can see it for themselves, but they were going to need the paperwork. I knew that was going to be an obstacle for ranchers to spend the time writing up everything they do. They don't have time for one, and it would seem pointless. Two, the cost. We paid between $6,000 a year for one ranch to be audited. That is very expensive. That would not pay for ranch by ranch to ranch to do it. I had done it because I felt it was important to the brands who would begin to require that you meet these standards in order to buy your wool.
So at least in the beginning, you were paying this auditing fee for the farms to get this certification so that you would then have more supply for the wool that you had a market for. Is that correct?
Yes. Initially, I was paying that amount of money for just our family ranch.
Yes.
The standard is built for success. So if you're going to be in it, it makes more sense to have a group of farms. So you can have a farm group. Doesn't need to be a co-op. You can have different business structures, but you put a group together. So I applied to Textile Exchange to establish Shaniko Wool Company. As soon as I established the company, I applied to be a farm group, and I went through a process to do that. I was approved to be a farm group. I am the internal control manager. I'm the farm group manager. I get audited every year on my management of the farm group, which means that they want to make sure I vet the ranches correctly. We all meet the benchmarks. I do an internal audit of every ranch every year. So I see them. I'm on site. I assign any nonconformances. We correct the nonconformances to ensure that our farm group is compliant. So I'm audited and some of the ranches are audited. So now that I'm a group, there's a formula. They look at the square root of the number of ranches is how many actually get audited. In the beginning, I added 2 ranches. There were 3 of us. So we all 3 got audited each year. And Shaniko Wool paid all the audit fees, and we were all audited, plus they audited me as a farm group. So we had 4 audits. And we spent about $7,000 for those 4 audits, which is a lot more economic than $5,000 for one ranch.
Yes. And I wonder if you could illuminate a little bit. Why was it so expensive? You know, people are trying to do the right thing. What's the big cost behind it? Do you know?
Well, you have to use a credible certification body. So they have staffs. It's its own industry, these certifiers.
Okay.
And they are global companies that ensure that our food is safe, that there's safety inside. They run safety audits, food audits. You know, it's not my business. It's not my field. There's a cost to their infrastructure. There's a cost to their auditors being trained to implement these standards. There's a cost to them traveling to do the audits and then all the paperwork and filing all of the traceability documents so that when you buy a product made with certified wool, you're 100% confident that actually was certified wool that went all the way through all those steps in the supply chain and landed in that sweater.
Right.
And actually, it's not unreasonable because we spent about $8,000 last year. And today I have 10 ranches in my farm group. Collectively, we are shearing 500,000 pounds of merino wool a year.
Wow.
We graze collectively 2.6 million acres. So am I okay with spending $8,000 a year for all of us to be certified? Plus, 3 of our Western wool warehouses are certified all under Shaniko's umbrella under that one fee.
So who were you working with in 2005? I'm curious because Patagonia happened in 2012, but you were saying you had a national brand buying your stuff in 2005. Did I get that right?
Norm Thompson, you'll love this. They were headquartered in Hillsboro, Oregon, just outside Portland. And my husband was asked to moderate a meeting between environmental interests and landowners, farmers and ranchers. He was a very wise voice. He was a creative thinker. He was a systems thinker. And he was an amazing human being. You know, he's gone. He passed away a year and a half ago. And Shaniko Wool Company is a way I honor him and his life's work in natural resource stewardship. And he was a great mentor for me. All I had to do to sell wool was tell his story and tell our life. And it sold. I didn't have to be a marketer. I didn't have to know how to build a brand. I was building one and didn't even know it. You know, he was asked to do this, and I wore a beautiful black and white cowhide print jacket to this event. I was just in the audience. It was gorgeous. I still have it. It's in the closet. And it was made of sheep's wool, hand felted by a local fiber artist to silk. And I wore it to the event. And someone said to me, Jeanne, what are you wearing? It's stunning. I said, well, it's my effort at keeping the range war going between the sheepmen and the cattlemen. This is my cowhide print jacket made of lamb's wool. And he started laughing and he said, but who made it? I said, it's my wool. It's part of my textile project. And it was made by a local fiber artist and cut and sewn locally. I didn't even know what Norm Thompson was. And so he made a connection and we started a conversation and they invited me to their offices. And I said, no, I think you should come here. I think you should take one day because everything they made was important. So I said, you take a day and drive out. You can be out here in one day from Portland. I'll give you a tour. You can get home for dinner. So they did. They came. The vice president and the director of corporate sustainability, they came. And in their own words, the tour blew them away, them away. Because it doesn't matter who comes here. When the Ralph Lauren design team came here, they didn't go look at wool and textiles. Not even close. We started on the landscape. We spent a half a day touring the landscape and the animals and natural resource stewardship. Then we fed them a meal of place. And then we went to the textiles. And then they invited me to their headquarters. And there I was walking through the Norm Thompson out headquarters, the first fully LEED certified building built in the state of Oregon. They were at the leading edge of corporate sustainability, had some really great, talented people. And all over the hallways and the walls of the conference rooms were these beautiful landscape photos of Oregon. Rolling wheat fields, the forest, the high desert. And not one product came from those places. And so when we started the meeting, with the CEO now, I said, I got to tell you a story. I just walked through your hallways for the first time. I love your company. I love what you're doing, but you don't have one product from the places that you're showcasing on the walls of this building, of this company. What I can bring you is a product from the fields right there in the hallway, right out that plate glass window. I can bring authenticity to your brand story. That's what we do.
Amazing. Did they get it?
They placed their first order. They placed order after order after order. And my fiber artists were going, Jeanne, It's too much. You've got to scale your production. And in fact, they helped push me to move to the commercial level of bringing textiles to where I moved my wool processing into the southeast of the U.S. and began finding the knitting factories, the weaving factories, and the people who could help me cut and sew in New York, who could help me bring a commercial level of product to scale.
Before we get away from the meeting with the people, what you just described in that meeting room, and you enlighten those people as to the importance and the authenticity of product with place. I was just struck by the contrast. When Emma and I first got into this in 2016, we went to the big magic show in Las Vegas to pick textiles for our clothing line that we were starting. And it was just this giant room full of booths with things from all over the place. And everything was just completely disconnected from its source. And we were struck then at that moment that there was zero linen from the United States. We found out very quickly, and really very, very little of anything else. And that was in 2016. So just what you're describing is such an enlightened moment for really American commerce, really. I'm so impressed that you did that. You're a visionary. So what were you holding up there just a minute ago?
I'm holding up my book because a woman who spent her lifetime in fashion and textiles, she was an academic, a professor, Dr. Leslie Davis Burns, followed my journey from the get-go. And one day she came to me and said, Jeannie, you know what? She's written many, many textbooks. So people that go to FIT or Parsons or whatever, all over the world, her books are translated into many languages. She works with Bloomsbury Publishing out of London, who probably publishes more books in the fashion and textile space than any other company. And she came to me one day and said, Jeannie, you know what's not in the literature is how did you do it?
Yeah.
How did you get to private labeling products for Ralph Lauren Home?
Yeah. How did that happen?
I started glowing the phone, finding the people near me that could help me, that could spin it, that could knit it, crochet it, weave it, cut and sew it, felt it. And we built products, washing and combing and dyeing and spinning and weaving and knitting and cutting and sewing and manufacturing and packaging and labeling and shipping to a distribution center with somebody's brand on it. And nobody would ever know that I moved it through that whole process and put it in their warehouse. I moved into multiple market channels. I started moving yarns into stores, into the yarn shops across America. When I sold that first business, which I haven't mentioned until now, but I did, I had yarns in 450 to 500 stores across America. That was its own market channel. That was pattern design for the home knitter crochet where you make your own. So you had the yarns, you had the patterns, you had product development, photo shoots, wholesale customers, direct online selling. It was the whole gamut, its own trade shows. That's one market channel. I was doing production yarn to brands like Ralph Lauren and J. Crew and others. I was doing my own home good line, the Imperial Blanket Program, into stores across America. Blankets, bed blankets, baby to king, pillows, shams, from my market lambs that I brought home to the ranch, cured every pelt, baled and shipped 50 at a time to be tanned and to honor the life of the animal taken, to use even the hide in our program. I had 4 market channels, and every one of those was its own business of product development, trade show, customer support, and so on. It was really huge. But in the process, I grew from close to home, further out, finding the partners as soon as I could get to scale to bring beautiful knits, wovens, cut and sewn products, to bring an American story with American fiber, supporting American family ranches and American manufacturing partners. My family grew. Every chef became part of our family. Every knitter became part of our family. Every weaver, every spinning factory, the knitting factories, the weaving supply chain. These guys, I care about them. I didn't used to care about the weather in the Northeast or the Southeast of this country. I wasn't connected to them. I was not connected to them. I was not connected to the restaurants in Portland, Oregon. Those people were different than us. We probably didn't vote the same way. But the day I delivered lamb to the back door of that restaurant or yarn to the yarn shop in Portland down the street, first of all, the synergy of that was beautiful for them, business to business in their neighborhoods. That's when I recognized I needed them and they needed us because we brought what they then crafted into this beautiful meal or this beautiful knit treasure, to give their family. This is how we connected. This is how we came back together. And you know what? It taught me so many lessons that it's more about how alike we are than how different we are. That's where we need to focus. Out here, we talk about the urban-rural divide. Well, that's how the divide disappeared. How this evolving journey has taught me the most valuable lessons I've ever had. For one, when we disconnected product from place, we also disconnected from the people, from the processes and skills, and from the land itself. And when you're not connected to that land, there's no motivation for stewardship. By bringing this from place through the processes, you start to appreciate the people and the skills. Think of the guys in the spinning mills today that are left. We have very few spinning mills left in this country, really. But the art of carding wool, the highly technical skills of carding wool well are important. The spinning, how about weaving or knitting? As a culture, we don't appreciate that the way we used to. And, you get it closer in food. So, our chefs became the new rock stars. And those guys who can butcher nose to tail, they're like superstars. Look at all the food shows on television. And textiles is like 30 to 40 years behind, but it's closing rapidly. So I've tried to convince these guys inside our spinning mills in the South that they're the new sexy. They don't quite buy it, but man, we cannot give up the ability to provide what we need to survive on a daily basis, food, clothing, and shelter. We cannot entirely give up that ability and those skills to foreign countries. We will weaken our own country too much. I mean, the designer in the cubicle in New York City inside that brand touches that fiber just like I do when I'm helping a land be born. And we're shearing that wool and we're putting it in the supply chain. I'm important, the spinning mill, the scouring plant, the dye artist, the designer, the people that make the finished product, the marketers that tell the story, the communications experts, all of us are part of this. And you know what was the funniest thing? After the 2014 Olympics, when they told our story, you should have seen this community. We get mail 3 days a week. You got to drive 6 miles on the dirt road to get it. My mailman is now part of the Olympic uniforms. My UPS driver, he cried. He had just retired. He said, I want my job back. I want to be part of this. Oh my gosh. Everybody gets connected in this part of it.
We're in the mid-Atlantic. We're on the East Coast, and Emma lives in Washington, D.C., and I live just about 25 miles west of Washington, D.C. on a small farm. And so we're really interested in what's going on out here. You mentioned moving into the Southeast, and I wanted to find out, where are your ranches? And we're particularly interested in what's going on here on our side of the country.
Anything over here on the East Coast.
Okay, so how I'm connected to you is that all of our wool moves to the southeastern United States. That's where the only wool combing capability left in North America is. We have one top making facility left in North America, and it's in Jamestown, South Carolina. So here's how it works. I have ranches today in Nevada, California, Colorado, Idaho, and Oregon. We graze collectively. We also graze in some of Utah and some of Wyoming. We have 10 ranches, and that's the states that we're grazing and that we're located in. I have a weight fast as I can sell wool, but I cannot be economically irresponsible because Shaniko Wool, as soon as the ranches shear, and then the wool is moved to the regional wool warehouses. That's the next step. The wool leaves the ranch. It's all marked RWS on the bales. It's also marked Nativa because I haven't mentioned to you yet that I am now certified also to Nativa Regenerative. So Shaniko Wool is dual certified as of 2022 to the Responsible Wool Standard and Nativa Regen. And so our wool leaves the ranches with all the bales marked, and it moves to our regional Western wool warehouses. All those warehouses are under my certified umbrella to ensure traceability, and they are all audited every year by me and by the certification body to ensure that we do not mix certified with non-certified, and it's fully traceable, and we have all the documentation in place. Then that wool goes to Jamestown, South Carolina, from all of these ranches. It goes there. And that's where it lives until it's washed and combed and then ships out to the next stage, which can be a couple of different things. It mainly stays in the Carolinas for spinning. We have 3 primary spinning mills that are spinning Shaniko wool. They all have wool in-house right now. Okay, so then it goes to knitting factories, which may be in New York, New Jersey, the Midwest, California, wherever these little pockets of knitters are growing up. Our yarns are going there to knit products. So like Janessa, who's been on your show, Janessa Leone, she's knitting with Shaniko Wool, gorgeous yarns. So the wool went from the ranches to Jamestown. It got washed and combed. It went to another neighboring town in the Carolinas to be spun and dyed. It then went to Los Angeles to be knit for Janessa, where she can move in and out of that factory and check on progress and work on product development. And then from there, she sells that and she tells the story. This is putting all of us together again, all of us reconnected. She knows the spinners, the dyers, the knitters, the people who wash it and comb it, and the ranchers. And the more successful she is, the more successful we are. So because I personally buy all that wool, I must sell all that wool to stay in business. But I want to guarantee these ranchers a premium. And the only way I can do that is to give it to them. I am so fortunate because the brands, I know who some of the brands are. They know how to come find me. Textile Exchange, I'm on their website because I'm a certified farm group. So those brands looking for certified wool can find me and call me, and they do every day. And then we work it forward. The more ranchers I can add, the more ranchers will make that 25% premium.
Now, let's hear about the carbon initiative. Are you ready to talk about that?
I am, because it truly is. I only wish Dan had lived to see what's happened. So in 1990, 2 salmon came to spawn in Buck Hollow Creek. We're the birthplace of 2 creeks on this ranch. And it truly is a humbling experience because what we do matters. And that's why I want you to be connected to it. I want everybody to know our efforts, and they're part of it. They're part of it. So, 2 salmon return. We went through this incredible effort to build a management plan to help guide our stewardship of natural resources. And we could see through our observations changes happening, even in year 1. We could tell in our yield data off our crop and our hay ground. We could tell by weaning weights of lambs and calves. You can tell by your observations where the game birds are, how the deer population is. We have Fish and Wildlife giving us elk counts, deer counts, antelope counts. We have fish counts. We have observations. We have yield data. We have species counts. We have testimony from our natural resource agency partners. All of that tells us, are we doing a better job or a poor job? Are we holding our own? Are we losing ground? But guess what? Nobody had ever actually measured it. And in the winter of 19, a brand said something to me that stopped me, asked me straight out, if we were destroying our soil and our grazing lands in raising livestock and harvesting. And it was really hurtful, I will tell you, actually, because this was 2019. Since 99, we'd been on this mission to tell our story of stewardship and sell a product, and we had been returning salmon to our creeks in record numbers. It made me realize what was needed now. And I'm thanking them for that. I'm thanking them for challenging us in the way they did. Because what it did was it pushed me to the next logical step. Okay, you're not going to take my word for it. You're not going to take all this other evidence, including being certified and having an auditor here looking at our land management and animal practices, seeing it for themselves and saying, yes, they are doing it. So I started reaching out, and I found a gentleman, Dr. John Talbot, with Oregon State University, who has done a lot of things in his career. One of them was he was hired by the Department of Energy to create and deploy carbon capture technologies. He spent a lifetime in carbon sequestration, grazing, and agriculture, both growing up in Wyoming in a ranching family, and then all his academic work in range science. So I said, John, I want to know something. Can we actually measure the ecosystem impacts of our ranching? And he said, well, of course we can. I said, really? I said, I want to know, we all earn money each year, and we all spend money each year. At the end of the year, did we put money in the savings, or did we add to our debt load? Let's think of the environment in the same way. At the end of the year, did I bank an environmental value, or am I degrading the environment? Am I a polluter, a net polluter? Because when we think about it, every one of us is using resources and creating waste. So we're all net polluters. How many of us actually have an opportunity to bank an environmental value on a net basis each year in our own personal life? Not a lot of us. But as managers of broad landscapes, we have that opportunity. And I actually thought that I believed we were doing it, but we didn't have any proof. We didn't have any measures.
Yeah.
John, I want to measure it. I want you to determine what our key performance indicators are be, and let's measure for it. And so we began, and he created our model. So we measure our soils down to 60 centimeters. We measure 20 centimeter samples, and we take 60 centimeter samples twice a year, early growing season, late growing season. We also clip a complete quadrat of biomass, standing biomass at each site, early growing season and post growing season and grazing. That's our physical measures, and those go to separate laboratories for analysis. They're going to tell us how much carbon we're holding year to year to year, testing date to testing date to testing date, ongoing. It's an investment. It's costly. Then we use the leading computer models to input our ranch's practices. And we put in 20 years of data from our ranch, plus our ongoing management practices. Those models account for our electrical use, all of our equipment, our farming, right? Any inputs, any fertilizer, all of our fossil fuel use, and our methane emissions from the livestock. And we're able to determine in this combined model how much carbon we're sequestering and whether we're sequestering on a net basis, whether we're building our carbon stock, and what our GHG emissions are. So we have 3 years of data on our Oregon ranch, 50 square miles of high desert landscape, which is a marginal country. We don't even get 8 inches of rain a year anymore in our current drought cycle. So every drop is precious. We do no irrigation. We're all dry land. Any cropping we do is all dry land. And our livestock graze everything, including our cropland. Our livestock touch and impact every acre of that ground, okay? They're instrumental in the management schedule. The net impact of our ranch is that we deliver multiple harvests a year, have been for 152 years, of beef, lamb, wool, and crop grains and hays. And our net ecosystem impact, which is I would say our greatest deliverable is that we are also banking 60,000 tons of carbon into our soils and grazing lands in this desert semi-arid environment each year. That is our net impact. So not only are we bringing food, clothing, and shelter to humankind to support our neighbors and the greater human community, we are pulling down more than 218,000 tons of CO2 on a net basis at the same time. And our GHG emissions are a negative. They're a negative number. That's where we're at today. This data has been reviewed. All the data has been reviewed. Our carbon increases are statistically significant. And the data has been reviewed by one of the leading voluntary ecosystem and carbon market companies that's come from Europe that's now working in the United States. And they register quality credits with Vera, maybe the leading carbon registry in the world. And Shaniko Wool Company's research and measurement model has now been approved. So we're continuing our measurement model. And we've been approved as our own project to bring quality inset programs to companies who want to become our partner in these investments and invest in regenerative work at scale on the ground. This is a tool we didn't have to provide to our next generation of all the ranchers in my group to help influence our future management and what we're doing with these on the ground. It supports the fact that agriculture can have a positive impact to the environment. So it supports a positive story of agriculture, of good management and operational practices. It brings perhaps a new income stream to farmers and ranchers. Smaller and mid-sized family ranches struggle today to continue on managing these landscapes. Why? All of our input costs go up. Our labor costs, you know what's happening with labor. All of us do. Fuel costs, all inputs. The costs go up. And when you turn around to sell a harvest, do you think anybody wants to give you that increase? No. Last year's prices are worse. We still are competing against all the imported cheap product, trying to stay in business and do a good job of stewarding these broad landscapes in America. So this is what will draw brands home, is this proven impact. And it will also help bring increased income to farmers and ranchers who are doing the work.
You know, you said in the very beginning that way back many decades ago, your husband said he just wanted to see the earth win. And so what a wonderful legacy he has left in now in this hard data that the earth is winning at your ranch. You guys were such a team.
I miss him every day. And I sold my first textile business that I told you how this began. 99, all the work, 05, Norm Thompson, then 2012, the London Games and the call from Ralph Lauren. And then they told our story. They brought others, then Patagonia, which took me to the RWS. And then at that time, my husband had developed an incurable disease, and it became necessary for me to unload all that work and focus on his care. I sold the value-added textile business, and I became my husband's full-time caregiver. And then he passed away about a year and a half ago. And at the time I started Shaniko Wool, it's because I was taking care of him, but the brands were just calling. And, you know, he was so proud of the work we'd done that I could take him and we could go together and go to these ranches and sit in the kitchen and drink coffee and get in the truck and tour their ranch and talk about management of the soil and the grasses and perennial species and fader species and the reduction of pesticides and traditional plowing versus no-till and minimal till and health care of our livestock. And he loved it. And I could interview those guys and write those management plans. We could do that business together because I could take him with me or we could do it from home. We built Shaniko Wool too together, you know. And today, this work of measuring the real impact of our lives, I guarantee you the fashion brands learning about our research and our model and why it's important, what it's telling us, it's building this relationship. And the next partner we'll bring to the table, the Ecosystem Services Carbon Market Company, to help frame potentially an inset program that makes all of us stakeholders together on the work on the ground with grazing sheep and the health of our soils and our grasslands.
That's amazing.
We can be so proud. And I believe that your husband, Dan, knows. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know what you believe, but I certainly believe it. And that things have come so full circle from his earliest efforts and your earliest efforts. And the two of you as a team, my gosh, what a force. What a force. I want to give you a chance to toot your own horn a little bit. Tell us about the big award you got in January, if you'd like to.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Oh, this was an honor. There's a lot of things going on, and I appreciate this whole bigger community. One of the things I want to mention is that Textile Exchange actually flew me to London in August to be the voice of responsible animal fibers for the globe.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, in the film they created around these animal fiber standards, responsible down, responsible wool, responsible mohair, responsible alpaca. I mean, that was a tremendous honor. And then what followed was here in America, which really means so much to me, our own American sheep industry. And I know this came about because 3 of my ranchers nominated me for it. And, you know, I had 10 ranches in my farm group. These men and women are incredible leaders, not only locally, but nationally. I've got people on the executive committee of the American sheep industry. They're on the executive board. They're former presidents of the American sheep industry. They're heads of the American Wool Council. And they're choosing to join Shaniko Wool. What an honor. I mean, I'm so humbled. Every day that I get to work with these families, every one of them has been on their ranches 100 years or more, just like us. Multi-generational. These are folks that know their land. And 3 of them nominated me for the American Sheep Industry Innovation Award for my leadership in taking American wool to these global third-party standards, leading the way in becoming certified, and my leading work in our measurement initiative, investing in this measurement, because it is costly, but I think it's an answer to our future, and it will lead us toward a new income stream, which will secure our future on the land. So I'm really grateful to the American sheep industry for that award.
Well, you are a visionary and a force, and you are making it happen. And we are so honored to talk to you and hear your story. And it's so exciting to know you and really understand now what's going on over there.
Well, hey, we're all in this together. I don't want to forget to thank you for the work that you're doing. You have tremendous passion for what you're doing, a great skill set, and you're spreading this energy, this momentum, and this subject matter, which is so important to all of us. And you're drawing people in, you're finding the stories, you're making the connections. So thank you for your effort on this, and thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I need the Janessa Leones of the world.
Yeah.
I need people to make a commitment close to home and then be a partner, not just source the wool, be a partner in the work on the ground. And we're at that stage with her. I just introduced her to this company who can provide the framework for the investment so that Janessa Leone, the brand, can source our wool, but they can also be an investor in the regenerative work on the ground, as long as we are delivering on the measured, improved ecosystem deliverable, which we plan to continue doing. So far we are, and we have no plan to cease that work. If anything, it's going to accelerate the work on the ground.
Yeah.
So we're there with Janessa.
That's like so exciting. Oh, and I wear that sweater almost every day. It's amazing.
It's delicious. It's just delicious. And when you know the story behind something that's against your body, it's even more, as you know. But is there anything else you want to add or anything you want to leave the audience with?
I'll just say that people say, how did you get from 0 to 60, right? I mean, how did you go from a ranch, fairly remote, knew none of this, to a partner to global fashion brands on a world stage. And I guess I grew up with folks who always said you can do anything you put your mind to. Maybe I believed them. But the other thing is that I didn't know I couldn't do it. And that's a great lesson. We have to just take the lid off the jar, and we just have to do the work in front of us, work together wherever we can collaboratively, and then see where it leads, because we set our own limits too much. And I didn't know that I couldn't do it, so I just pressed on. And I think we all just need to press on.
Oh, that's such good advice. Thank you. That means so much.
Thank you so much. So inspiring. I'm going to go throughout the rest of my day just feeling so inspired and filled up with exciting things and
good dirt.
Good dirt.
Yeah, good dirt.
Love that. How'd you think of that?
Emma thought of it. Emma said, I have the name for a podcast, and we've been doing it 3 years now. So thank you so much for your time today. It has been just such a marvelous conversation, and I'm so excited about it. And I'm so excited for our audience to hear all this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in, calling in, and spreading the good dirt. We love hearing from you. You can reach our listener voicemail at 443-459-1950. That's 443-459-1950. You can find this number in our show notes and in our Instagram profile.
This show is produced by Lady Farmer, a slow living lifestyle community, and the original music is composed and performed by John Kingsley.
For more from Lady Farmer, follow us on Instagram at We Are Lady Farmer. That's We Are Lady Farmer. Or join us online at www.ladyfarmer.com. We'll see you next time on The Good Dirt.
Goodbye.